Hello, everybody, and welcome back. This is the Dissidents Podcast, produced by the Institute for Liberal Values, and we are the sub-series of the Dissidents Podcast. It is the Free Speech Forward podcast, and this is the sub-series of that podcast where we are doing an ongoing celebration this year for the Declaration of Independence because it is the upcoming 250th anniversary of that glorious document. And today we are going to be having a wonderful conversation, I believe, with Dan Isadore. And Dan is someone who really appreciates something that we definitely believe here, that freedom is a value for everyone. And this crosses both secular and religious lines. And as much as we know that our social nature as human beings is so important, that the individual matters too. And we're really here to talk about the sacredness of the individual, whether that's sacred from a religious perspective or a secular perspective, and thinking about how the Declaration helps enshrine that value in our culture. But I'm going to turn it over to my co-host, Chris, who will officially introduce you to Dan.
Well, thanks, Joia. And hey, Dan, how you doing?
Pretty good.
Great to have you on with us today.
Thanks for having me.
So for those of you out there who are just meeting Dan for the first time, Dan is a university and young adult chaplain for the Episcopal Diocese of Pittsburgh. He's a Pittsburgh native with a wife and 2 kids, enjoying the life in Pennsylvania and living his dream, helping young adults discover the sacredness of their individuality and invest in developing their flourishing. So with that intro, Dan, we usually like to just kick it off by letting you tell us your origin story. How did you become an advocate for a free society, and briefly, even what does that mean to you?
Yeah. I think it's always been something. I think it started. I always felt that I was held back from being me, whether it was in school or in sports. Every time I would let my individuality out, something unique about myself, oftentimes I would find it stuffed back down or suppressed in some way, and so that led to a lot of issues with self-confidence growing up. It led to questioning my own identity. And that took a number of twists and turns, but I think the thing that the thing that my sophomore year in college, when I was a waiter at a local chain restaurant called Eaton Park, I met a man by the name of James Miller Peck. He was a professor at Westminster College up in New Wilmington, PA. And I took his order, and he looked at me and he said, "Who are you?" And that began a 20-year friendship. Miller was a brilliant man. He was a mathematics professor. He chaired the department without having ever received a PhD. But even though he was always the smartest person in the room, when you were with Miller, he made you feel like you were the most important person in the room. And these conversations with Miller, whether it was by email or by phone or in person, and we met and talked a lot, I think they gave me the freedom to begin to finally not just be myself, but like being myself. And once you taste freedom, it's kind of addictive.
Mm-hmm.
And so that led to me just giving myself and my aspirations the respect that they deserved. And whenever you start to treat yourself that way, I think that's the way you start to treat other people. So I became very interested in other people, particularly young, because that was the stage in life that I really where this stuff really started to hit me, and that's maintained my interest. So my appreciation for freedom and individuality is a very down-to-earth kind of appreciation. I'm glad that we live in a country that was founded on these principles, but I really think that this stuff is important for the day-to-day and how we grow up and mature as human beings, and how we can treat each other and help one another thrive.
I definitely share with you that appreciation for wanting to help the next generation to flourish and to thrive. But I know in my conversations with some of the youth, if we're going to tie this back even to the Declaration, so many would say, well, what does this Declaration have to do with me? That was 250 years ago. What do the founders, they weren't Gen Z. They don't know what it's like to live with internet and TikTok. What relevance does this have for my life? These founders, they were slaveholders, they were colonists. They have no idea what it's like to be Gen Z or Gen Alpha coming up. So I'm curious what you would say in this down to earth way that can connect with people about why this document is so important and worth celebrating.
Yeah, well, as I understand that, it's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? That's what it focuses in on. And so I think a way that you could sum that up is they were about the activation of human agency. Um, and I think that is what so many people, and young people in particular, are really yearning for. One of the things right now that's becoming common to talk about is the loneliness epidemic,
Mm-hmm.
and the way that many institutions are trying to address this, or at least the way they're saying that they're trying to address it, is to try and provide belonging. I don't think that's right. I think we need to promote agency. Um, we need to restore this concept of the individual and their sacredness, of their ability to think for themselves and their ability to act for themselves. Um, and I think that this is what the founders were after. It was the each individual needs to be protected in such a way that they are free to act and thrive. And if they do, um, a great country will be built. And so I think that anytime that particularly now, what is being stolen from people? Well, their attention. And if your attention is stolen, you can't develop your agency. Agency starts with attention.
Mm.
And so now, with all the technology, with all the wars over group identity and which group you need to join and which authority figure you need to listen to, what young people need is a quiet space to begin to get to reacquaint themselves with themselves, and the whole notion that they are a creative agent with a tremendous capacity to act if they're willing to develop it.
Wow, I love that, and you're right that definitely was, I think, one of the fundamental operating premises of the founders in stating that every individual has an unalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? And so I think that's certainly one of the timeless principles that they endowed that document with, and made explicit by writing it down there, for sure. So, I think the point of timeless principles or truths is that they never change over time, right?
Right.
So
They're always relevant. You just need to see the right angle, right?
right,
Even
and
if everyone around you isn't asking the same question as you are, that doesn't mean they're asking the right question,
right.
right?
Well, and
So,
it's interesting the way you put it, of kind of framing the belonging, the loneliness epidemic or crisis, whatever the phrase people want to use, and the desire for belonging versus your solution as individualism. One could even kind of almost read that as kind of the individual versus the group kind of dichotomy. I definitely want to have a conversation offline about that with you, because I too am thinking a lot about the loneliness epidemic in my own separate work. But I
yeah,
want
and
to,
if I could just add something real quick,
yeah,
with that regard, if the problem is that we lack substantial relationships, why should we depend on someone else to provide those for us? What if you could become the kind of person who could create a substantial relationship?
mm,
And that's what we've done for the last 2 decades, and that's what we think that we're helping people do. Because
yeah,
that's really the answer. It puts the power back in your hands rather than just looking around and saying, "Well, will somebody help me?"
Yeah, someone will someone create a community for me, or
That's right.
where is the community I can go to versus what can I create?
Yep.
But I guess the point I was going to go down is some would argue that it's actually the hyper individualism of our current age that is leading to alienation and loneliness because everyone's going into their own corners and talking past each other, having their own narratives and the like. So, I mean, maybe that's just a false premise, but how do you see, let's bring it back to the Declaration, how do you think focusing people on the value of free speech, for example, can help them have better conversations and start to find common ground, or at least, stop talking past each other and start listening and having more civil discourses with each other?
Yeah, I think the value of free speech is derived from the value of the individual, right? If this individual is sacred, well then you should grant them the decency to listen to them, right? That's part of the attention that we give each other. It's not just to look at each other, but to listen to one another. Um, and I think if we started there, then maybe we could connect. That's something that I try and do with young people. Everyone that I meet, it's like, let's grab coffee. What do you want to do? Talk. That's it. Because we all talk, we all drink coffee, right? We're all human beings, and if you can quiet down long enough and listen to someone else speak freely, what's ever on their mind, you build a connection. Uh, when you try and what's the word I'm looking for? Uh, Shut people down
Mm,
and decide what they can and can't say, well, you cancel out their individuality from the start. Now they're just thinking about a rule that they have to keep. They can't express themselves. You
mm,
can't. You have no avenue into their mind or their heart, right? We have to open up these avenues of speech and respect other people enough to listen to what they really have to say. And if we did, oh my gosh, I think all kinds of connections could be made, rather than just, what am I supposed to say? What am I supposed to do? Stop
mm.
it. Just respect the individual and listen to one another.
I really appreciate your focus on how, when we're able to speak freely, that's precisely what allows us to connect to other people. It's not a point that many even recognize, that free speech gives us that ability to be authentic, and then that when we are authentic, that's even what enables and empowers genuine connection
Yep.
between human beings. But of course, one of the things we hear in the culture nowadays, of course, is that if we allow people to speak freely, that there would just be so much misinformation or disinformation. And of course, one of the important aspects of free speech is this idea of the pursuit of truth. The Declaration famously has the lines, "We hold these truths to be self-evident," although perhaps it's questionable, or one could argue whether or not those are in fact self-evident. So I'd be curious even to hear what you would have to say about this connection of speaking freely and free speech and the pursuit of truth. Do we have to worry about misinformation, as people sometimes think?
I'm trying to think of how to put this. The whole notion of misinformation is I think it's premised on the idea that you're some kind of authority, right? So it's kind of a top-down assumption. You can misinform someone. Just because I say something doesn't mean you should listen to it. Just because anyone says something doesn't mean you should listen to it. That's the only way that I think misinformation happens if you relinquish your own responsibility to deal with the information that you're being given. But this comes back to individual responsibility, right? So I think anyone should be able to say basically anything. Um, and then it's the responsibility of each individual to decide what is true and what isn't. At the same time, um, I think most of the time, at least myself, I'm an external processor, and I think a lot of people are. You can't get to truth without speaking. You need to sift through a whole bunch of errors in order to get to truth and then refine the truth. You have to be able to put yourself out there and know that you're not going to be canceled or imprisoned or murdered. Otherwise, how are we ever going to get to the truth? We all have to learn, and we learn by thinking, and we think by speaking, and by creating a situation or refounding a society where this is normal. I think it would get us closer to truth. It's whenever you try and police speech that I think truth gets locked away and hidden, and we can't find it. We can't pursue it as well because, well, there are taboos that prevent us from doing that.
Well said, and certainly if we drift away from a lot of those founding principles in the Declaration, I think it's not coincidental that we see these other derivative freedoms like free speech waning, not just legally but culturally as well, right? So I guess to that end, how would you, if we're trying to kind of reassert the value and import of free speech and expression, encouraging more people to think aloud in public and talk their thoughts out with others to get to that truth, like how would you connect that to new youth that you're dealing with for whom the Declaration is a kind of remote and very abstract and, arguably irrelevant document? What are some of the ties you see between some of those foundational values of life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and freedoms like the freedom of speech, religion, and the other rights that I think are easier for the modern American to still grasp?
I'm not. Are you saying like how do I communicate this to young people, or are you asking something different?
What do you see as the connection between life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness and values like free speech, and then how can we make that connection more clear for other people so that they value both?
Yeah, so I think the connection is there. I think if the individual's free, then any action they take should be free too, provided that it keeps other people free at the same time. So free speech is directly derived from the respect and the sacredness of individuals. And then the way that I really think, there's all kind, people start organizations, people start platforms such as, podcasts, they create websites, they write books, they become lecturers. But what I've found is that we have to make this stuff flesh for people. And so I try and it's almost, it's not covert and it's not so much subversive, but it's kind of implicit. I try and be the sort of person that encourages the free speech of young people. So whenever I meet with a person, it's almost always one-on-one, but I try and create an atmosphere where they feel free to speak. And that takes time. It takes effort because trust has to be present. But I really try and ask questions and listen in such a way that they are encouraged to share what maybe they might think they shouldn't, or to say what they think they couldn't, right? So I think a lot of this stuff, I think we always want to address macro problems with macro solutions. I think most of the time, the way that you really address a macro problem is on the grassroots level with micro solutions. And this really comes down, reconnecting young people to the principles in the Declaration. It comes down with how we treat one another. They need to be treated as free, responsible individuals with a voice. And the more that we can create an environment for them, for that to happen interpersonally, I think that kind of jumpstarts the process. And then all you guys doing these great things, creating organizations, creating podcasts, electing good people in office, revamping academic institutions and ecclesiastical institutions, all of that takes over whenever the individual is set free.
I really appreciate what you shared here, this idea of approaching the macro level problems with the grassroots solutions. Because
Mm.
certainly something I've seen is that people give up. The problem feels so big, they feel, what can I do about this? Where when you really are focused on the grassroots, there's always something you can do. So I would love to ask you my favorite, I call it the blue sky question. It's the question of, if you had unlimited time, money, resources based on all your experience mentoring youth, what would you think is the most important thing that people could do, perhaps at a grassroots level, that would really start to make this change and help inculcate this culture and appreciation for freedom amongst everyone?
I mean, really, it comes down to character formation, I think. If each of us took seriously our creative capacity to help others grow, that's what I think would change the culture. Um, I mean, this is part of what we're trying to do with the organization that we're forming. We
Mm-hmm.
want to we want to tell people about we want to tell people about what we're doing for young people, how we're treating them as individuals, and by so doing, helping them thrive. But we also want to train people to do that. So if I had all the money in the world and all the power and everything, well, I'd give it up because I'm an individualist and I don't want to wield it over others. But
Good George
uh,
Washington inspiration there.
oh yeah, I hope that guy. Yeah, he was. Whatever you think of him, that's a pretty good move. That's
Yeah,
something to
iconic.
commend. But I think we need to focus on becoming the kind of people who can help young people live free. One of my friends, Marcia Enright, who I believe is on this podcast,
Mm-hmm.
she
Yeah.
she talked to me one time about how freedom can't just be declared. It can't just be legal. It has to be taught. We have to be disciplined in how to live as free people. And I think, at least for me, this really starts with, how do I facilitate others growing up into freedom? And that's where our mentoring comes in.
I'm curious, can you just share more about some of the principles that guide your thinking or your programming, or when you're developing these mentor relationships with youth? What is it? What aspects of character do you focus on?
Yeah. So I mean, the first thing is, it's really simple. People aren't going to come to us. We have to go to people. So we physically
Mm-hmm.
try and be present with young people wherever they are. It's such a simple change, but whether you're a church or a campus group or some other kind of institution, it's always, how do we get people here? I mean, that's great if people are looking for a here to come to. But
Mm.
now I think we have to take a more, in a religious context, we'd call it a more missional approach,
Yeah.
right? We're not trying to get them to come to us. We're trying to go to them. So I try and go to wherever people are. It might be a place of work. It might be school. It might be a coffee shop, a restaurant. I go golfing with students and young people, like wherever it is that and then what I start doing, it's typically just a question. And this would be about talking about character, becoming a curious person. How are you doing? What's good? What's not good? And then listen. And I'll tell you what, 98% of the time, that's all it takes. You don't have to ask another question, but you have to listen actively. You have to find what you can appreciate in that person and demonstrate that appreciation. And as that happens, the free speech starts, let me tell you. So that involves a lot of attention. It takes a lot of energy, call it psychological energy. It takes a lot of patience. Some people are slower to share. Other people are just waiting to share. And then I think it comes down to being able to allow the other person to be themselves, whether or not you agree with who they are, right? So providing that space for them to exist as they are without running away from them. In the Christian tradition, we talk about this as kind of like forgiveness. So you let go of the stuff that you don't like or that you think is wrong, right? Um, and I mean, David Kelly would talk about it. He probably wouldn't like me equating tolerance with forgiveness, but it's something like that, right? That hey, there are some differences between me and this other person. I don't think he would call them moral, that he'd call them maybe social or, cultural, that I just have to let go of in order to give this person space. And the last thing would be kind of to become an encouraging person, and to be an encouraging person, you have to have courage. It's strange to me, but this is I don't know if you guys can identify. It's difficult to speak directly to other people, to look them in the eyes and say to them, well, specifically to speak appreciative truth to other people, is to say, I really like you. You're really talented. I think you have a tremendous capacity for, I mean, what have you. But you have to be willing to you have to become the kind of person who has the courage to encourage people that way, to pick up on those things that are really good about other people, and to, in a sense, water them, to pour some love on them. Yeah, I guess that's a snapshot of kind of how I try and approach people in the.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. It's such a powerful and beautiful mission and kind of image that you paint of how to do it. It definitely takes an enlightened mindset, I think, and you're right that as human beings, for as much conversing as we do and for as social as we are, the kind of direct conversation that, like you say, good or bad. We know human beings are not good about delivering negative feedback, but we're not exactly great about delivering positive praise either to each other. And yet, in many ways, when you do that, you are not only being most authentic yourself and expressing what you value in someone else, but to your point, you're watering someone else's spirit by sharing that with them. And this is the first time I think I've ever heard of this concept, and yet I think it could be so transformative for so many people, including the speaker, the share of
absolutely
views.
Yes.
Like, I think it goes both ways. And so that's wonderful. I think those are some great, I think, ideas on how you set the framework. I'm curious, just to add on to Joia's question, like if there's any other tactics you find that are in your dealings with youth that you have found relatively more effective in also getting them to kind of consciously make this connection between expressing their individuality, stepping into their power, and then the value of freedom, or it's the relevance of a free society and kind of respecting individual rights, with others.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe you could make the explicit connections, but as you were talking, two things came to mind. One is it is essential that I'm authentic with other people. So I think one of the reasons that I have so many relationships with young people is that there's no sense in which I'm a clinician. There are clinicians that do good work, and there's an appropriate place for that. But they aren't coming to a clinic. This is something more like a friendship with a trusted mentor, uncle, or older brother, or something along those lines. I share my life with them. It's a two-way street. And there's something about the ability to take that risk and entrust other people with your free speech. I think that it tends toward reciprocity, right? It tends toward, well, if he can speak that way about his heart and his mind, maybe I can do the same. Sometimes that comes around, to explicit kind of teaching about this. Well, this is what America was founded on. This is how we've become as great as we've become. But most of the time, it's just me doing it. It's me being myself that really helps people become themselves. Do you want to jump in?
Oh no, I totally get what you're saying, and I think you made a great point earlier that oftentimes when people find their agency, they make the connection to their own freedoms, and it's kind of inevitable. And so I think in the same way, when people start to build just some of these character virtues by virtue, pun intended, of practicing it with others and seeing it modeled in others, I think that has a similar effect. So
Yeah,
these have been great
and I think
ideas that you
um,
shared.
can I add something else?
Oh yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
So
Please give us all you got. We're
there's this
taking notes.
there's there's this other concept that comes to mind, and the psychologist Nathaniel Branden talked about it, and David Kelly, the philosopher, also mentioned it, and it's the concept of visibility, and it comes down to this notion of um, when I experience myself, I generally experience myself as a process. I think I'm representing this correctly, right? I don't really get an objective experience of myself. I experience myself in process. It's sort of disseminated and hazy almost. But if I speak to somebody else and they see me and they get me and they understand me and they reflect back to me myself, I get an objective experience of myself. And what happens in that moment is I feel real. And if I feel real, I feel power. I feel freedom. I'm I would argue I have a greater tendency to take advantage of that power and that freedom. So in being authentic, in listening, in creating space for other people to think and for them to be encouraged and for them not to be run away from, I think what happens is they get, and this is more the lingo that you hear, they feel seen, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're like, somebody gets me. And that's like, it's almost like jolting them awake,
It's the
right?
spark. Yeah.
Yeah. It might not be dramatic. It might be. It might be little by little over time. But if you're awake, if you feel real, you might just act on it.
Wow. Oh, Joya, you look like you were going to say something. I didn't know.
Oh, no, no, I just wanted to thank you for sharing that concept with us, with the audience. I would love to take a moment and be direct and say thank you to you
Yeah.
for sharing these insights, for sharing the wealth of knowledge that you've gained from your experience, both with Chris and myself and with all of the audience for this podcast here. We see you and we appreciate you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for your time, Dan. This has been a great conversation, and I think you've left a lot for everybody to take away, including us, definitely. And how we want to approach our work as well, promoting these values. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
And as always, for all of you out there listening, we will see you in 2 weeks until our next episode drops. You can find us, as always, on YouTube under the Dissidents channel of ILV, as well as on all major podcast platforms under their Dissidents channel. See you next time.